guys, it's Jasma, and today I'm going to make a coconut mango layered cake. During the summer, I always like to levitate more towards the fruitier and creamier desserts rather than the denser and richer ones, so I thought this one would be perfect to share. First things first, preheat your oven to 325 degrees Fahrenheit because you want to bring this into the oven immediately after the batter is ready. So now to make the batter, I'm going to separate my egg whites from my egg yolks and make sure that everything that comes in contact with the egg whites is completely dry and clean. There's no water or grease on it because you don't want to risk having the egg whites not whip up. Then to the egg yolks, I'm going to add all the ingredients, starting with the sugar. Now in this recipe, there are two parts of sugar. This is the 20-gram portion. It's going to go in the batter, and then the 80-gram portion is going to go into the egg whites to make the meringue. So in that goes, and I'm going to quickly whisk this together just to break up the egg yolks and dissolve the sugar slightly. Then I'll pour in my flavorless oil and coconut milk. Mix everything together and then set it aside while we prepare the dry ingredients. So here I have some all-purpose flour, and to it I'm going to add my baking powder, a little bit of salt, and desiccated coconut. Give this a quick mix. Specifically, you're aiming to distribute the baking powder and salt, and then pour this into the wet ingredients, and then stir until it is smooth. It will be a little bit of a thick mixture. The batter portion is ready, so now onto the meringue, which is what's going to give this cake its light and airy texture. I'm using my stand mixer as always with a whisk attachment, but you can do this with a hand mixer as well. Start mixing this on medium-low speed until the egg whites become a little bit bubbly, and then we'll begin adding in the 80 grams of white sugar. I'm adding in the sugar in 3 different stages, so start with a third, mix this until it is dissolved and you can't see any sugar granules. Stop the machine to add in your second third, and then continue mixing on medium-high until the meringue starts to grow in volume. Add in your last bit of sugar and keep mixing until stiff peaks form. It should look really glossy and white and fluffy, and the meringue should at least tripled in size. To see if it's actually done, you want to hold up the beater, and if the peak of the meringue does not move around, then it is ready to go. To fold, we're first going to introduce a little bit of the meringue into the batter. Because the batter is quite thick, if you mix everything together all at once, it's going to be super difficult to combine and you're going to risk deflating all the meringue. So I just did my second scoop of meringue and I'm starting to fold this, and once it's combined, the batter should be light enough, so I'm going to pour it back into the rest of my meringue. Use a folding motion with your spatula where you go around the bowl, down through the center, and then around the bowl again to combine the batter. This is the best way to do it without deflating everything. And this is a bit unconventional, but I like to go back in with my whisk attachment, kind of pulling it like this just to break up any clumps of meringue that you miss with a spatula. This technique only works with a really big whisk, and make sure you do not overdo it. Now that the batter is smooth and combined, I'm going to pour it into my baking tray. I'm going to use a square baking tray like this, and I just line the bottom with some reusable parchment paper. Make sure that you do not grease the sides or anything at all because this is a chiffon cake and you want it to be able to climb and stick to the sides in order to rise to its maximum potential. When you're pouring in the batter, hold it very high so that it drops into the pan and kind of breaks up any large air bubbles. And then I use an offset spatula to smooth over the surface just so it rises evenly and forms a very nice flat sheet of cake. Tap the sheet on the counter a couple times because it's not fun to have empty pockets in your cake. And once you've done that, the surface should be really smooth, and we're going to send it off to bake in our preheated oven for about 30 minutes. The bake time will vary depending on the size and thickness of your cake. You'll know it's fully cooked when a toothpick inserted into the center of the cake comes out clean, so set this aside on a wired rack for it to cool down completely. Since this is a chiffon cake, it is inevitable that the cake will deflate just a little bit after it bakes. I don't like to flip this and let it cool upside down because I want at least one surface to be perfectly flat. We'll just trim off the top later on before we decorate. If you do like to eat chiffon cakes, I have made a couple different flavors on this channel before, so I'll link them out for you and be sure to check those out. I'm gonna need the layers of cake to be really even in order to actually stack it to form a nice and uniformed cake in the end. So now that my cake has cooled down, you can see that it has flattened in the center, so I'm going to flip this out. The cake should come out very easily, but if not, you can just run a butter knife around the edges. And here I'm just peeling off the baking paper on the bottom. Then flip it over to reveal the domed side, and now we're ready to trim. I'm gonna trim the edges a little bit first before shaving off the dome on top. So grab the longest serrated knife you can find, and I'm not using a ruler to do this because I feel like it's pretty easy to eyeball the edges of the cake. I'm just cutting off the slight crust that is kind of concaving inwards. And of course, don't worry about wasting any of the cake scraps. You can make cake pops with them or just eat it with any extra frosting. Now to trim off the top, I ran into a bit of an issue with my cake leveler where it didn't really give me the right height I wanted. So I stacked my cake on the back of a clean baking tray to accommodate the settings that the cake leveler has. Even with its restrictions, a cake leveler is still a great tool to have because it relieves me of a ton of stress of having to level a large piece of cake by hand, because I am certain it has never turned out as leveled as this. I'm now going to slice this into 3 exact pieces so that I can layer them and stack it into a rectangular cake. Use a ruler to make a few references because it really is important to be precise here. It'll result in a much cleaner looking cake in the end. I'm filling this cake with some fresh mango, so before we move on to making the frosting, I want to get it ready and just dice it up. Simply cut around the core and then scoop out the flesh using a spoon and then just cut it up into small cubes. For the frosting, I brought back my stand mixer. Again, this can be done with a hand mixer as well. And this is kind of a cream cheese whipped frosting. It's one of my favorite go-to frostings. It's very light and airy. So I'm starting off with my cream cheese, and this does not have to be at room temperature. I actually prefer this to be a little colder so that it can stabilize the whipped cream as well. Add that to your stand mixer bowl along with the white granulated sugar and mix this on medium speed until the cream cheese becomes creamy. Scrape down the sides of the bowl every once in a while and add in the vanilla extract, then continue mixing on medium to medium-high speed until all the sugar has dissolved and the cream cheese is lighter in texture. Now we could add in half the whipping cream, mix this until homogeneous, and then add in the rest of the cream. Be sure to scrape the sides of the bowl and especially the bottom to ensure all of the cream cheese is actually combined into the frosting. Mix this until stiff peaks form and it is ready to be used to frost the cake. Everything's ready, so it's time to assemble the cake. I have a nice and long platter here. I'm going to place on my first layer. From here on, you want to build up the layers, starting with cake, a layer of frosting, some mango, more frosting, and repeat until you run out of cake layers. I like to use a mini ice cream scoop to measure out the layers of frosting to ensure they're all even, and also so that I'm consciously reserving some frosting for the decorations on top. Spread the frosting as much to the edge as possible because this is a naked cake and you will see all the layers, so you want to keep it as uniformed as clean as possible. Once you finish everything off with the last layer of cake, press it all together and make sure it's flat on the surface and also clean up the sides a little bit more. Now we're ready to decorate the top. So I spread on another layer of frosting just to cover up any of the cake, and then I loaded my frosting into a piping bag with a round tip, and I'm forming a pattern by piping dollops of frosting and dragging it out with my spoon. Do this all across the cake and it should almost look like scales. Very simple decoration and very easy to do. Top it off with a few more mango cubes as well as some fresh mint leaves, and that is it with the decoration of this cake. This is such a delicious cake. I love the light scent of the coconut combined with the cream cheese frosting and of course the fresh mango layers. You can serve this right away or refrigerate it for a little bit for a cleaner cut. Feel free to subscribe if you like this video and go follow me on Instagram because I feel like I never promote that and I probably should. And the photos of this cake turned out pretty well, so go check it out. And yeah, thanks for watching. See you soon.